So I'm live with Tyler tonight, Mr. Wright, and our topic is specialization is for insects. The old adage by Robert Heinlein. And Heinlein was a man of many talents. He served in the Navy. He was a Navy commander, I believe, and had a variety of experiences throughout his life. And so he was a proponent of the idea of the jack of all trades, which has kind of fallen out of favor with a lot of people anymore. What do you think about that, Mr. Wright?
Yeah, well, most definitely. I think even back in those days, writing of Time Enough for Love by Robert A. Heinlein, that this was on his mind, that authors were seeing that shift from being a jack of all trades, being a master of none, but nevertheless, I think you described it the other day. You've got, how'd you describe yourself? Something like inch deep. What was it?
My knowledge is a mile wide and an inch deep.
Yeah, exactly. And if you look at the founding fathers of this nation, they were botanists. They delivered babies. They knew something about anatomy. They understood husbandry, and horses and tending to livestock, and and they were able to go out in the woods and come back with like a goose and two raccoons and a couple of partridges. This was just the way of life. But it's funny, you and I, we were talking, we ought to get back on a broadcast. It's been a while. And the question was, I asked you, what do you think we ought to talk about? And you say, I just kind of leave that to you, just whatever, I'm basically able to, talk anything. And I said, that's something I appreciate about you, Dr. Breck, that you are able to talk on pretty much anything thrown your way. You've dabbled in a little bit of everything, and like you said, you may not have mastered all of these disciplines. Who really has? But I said, that's pretty cool. And then I'm like, it's very Heinlein. Specialization is for insects of you. And you understood exactly what I meant. And that became the topic of today. So, so audience, those three of you that are listening, we're going to delve right into that.
You've got like 36 regular listeners now. Your videos are averaging over 20, viewers.
Yeah, I was just being a little sarcastic. We're pretty niche. We're pretty niche deliverers of information, and so I don't suspect we're going to be the next Joe Rogan by any means. Nor do I think I want that. You know what I'm saying? But and this topic may, in fact, be a little bit. It may touch on some things that's deeply unpopular amongst the midwit varieties of folks out there. Apologies for the slur, but it's a thing. So maybe should I just read this quote by Heinlein and then kick it back over to you?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So this was, I believe, it was from his work "Time Enough for Love." A little backdrop there. Robert A. Heinlein wrote the "Pass Through Tomorrow," I believe. Was that it? Anyways, it was a compendium of some loosely based and some more directly related works in this sort of in this series of works that center around Lazarus Long, and he's a gentleman who ends up living, the longest living human, thus his namesake Long, some 4,000 some odd years. And so this quote comes out of "Time Enough for Love," one of the more prominent works in that series, and it's written as thus: a human being should be able to change a diaper, plan an invasion, butcher a hog, conn a ship, design a building, write a sonnet, balance accounts, build a wall, set a bone, comfort the dying, take orders, give orders, cooperate, act alone, solve equations, analyze a new problem, pitch manure, program a computer, cook a tasty meal, fight efficiently, die gallantly. Specialization is for insects. I've loved this quote. I've really been into this quote since maybe I first read it back when I was 14, I want to say. I'm a much older man, and I still find that this is very prescient. What say you, Dr. Breck?
Absolutely. And I used it as a quotation in one of my books, actually, that's unpublished, as a very young person. So, like you, I was very captivated by it at a very young age. But I would say today people don't lend themselves to experience, in that people very much want to stay in their niche, stay in their lane, and that's why people don't want to go out and have experiences outside their realm of comfort, which is a real problem. And I've failed a lot in life, but I've had a lot of experiences, and I've tried to never turn down an opportunity to have an experience, regardless of what it is. And I've often not done well at it, but at least I've attempted it. And I'm not proud of that, but I'm just saying that to me is important as a writer, to have experiences, so something to write about.
Yeah.
And dabble in various professions, do various things. You brought up the founding fathers. Thomas Jefferson, horticulturist, was interested in all kinds of things, and that's just one example. But most people don't want to do a broad range of things, or don't want to even try to do a broad range of things. And yeah, the midwit is very much interested in staying in their lane. And I don't begrudge them their lane. I begrudge
Yeah.
them the idea that it's a problem if somebody wants to venture out and do other things.
Yeah. 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 As I'm thinking about this, and I too, by the way, I've experienced the same, where I've failed spectacularly trying my hand at some things, where it's like, yeah, don't let this guy manage our social media account. He does not know how to do that. Just because he's a younger guy doesn't mean he understands this, right? That was years back, right? I'm not a marketing guy either. But then there's other things that, I've since learned, public speaking, I'm pretty decent at it. That didn't happen overnight. And then, of course, computers, there's some outdoorsy related stuff, there's some art based thing, and then of course writing. But there's areas that I flounder in, and I think that that's the whole part of the deal, isn't it? Is you're supposed to kind of get out there and try things, and my sort of philosophy was, if I suck at something, well, that means I need to push on that. I need to get out there and do it. And that was just something I think I just told myself. It's like, okay, you're not good at this. Well, get good at it. You're not comfortable with it. Well, you know, um, you know, find the people that do it well, and ask questions and get over, your embarrassment. It's most people, they actually cut you some slack, I've found, if you don't understand, if you haven't hunted, for instance, hunted big game. um Most folks aren't going to laugh at you, or if you're not good at the language of the place that you're traversing. Most people are actually pretty cool about it, just the idea of wanting to learn. In the blue collar realm as well, so many times I'd seen these older guys who they get a young person who might not know the craft but want to learn. They've got this desire to learn. That you can work with that, right? That's some of the best social capital ever, is if the person wants to learn.
Absolutely. And, it applies also to interactions with different ethnic groups,
Yeah.
and as well as different trades and fields. people involved in different occupations, as you said, and people in different communities and cultures. If you come in with a good attitude, I believe anybody who talks about racism, and there's a lot of white people that do, and whatever, and Hispanics, whatever culture it is, you really need to learn how to interact with them, regardless of your feelings. It's great. So you can be whatever you want to be, white nationalist or whatever, but it is possible to interact with people properly, to actually get along with them, which you must do on some level. You
Yeah.
know, to some degree, it's very possible to have a good interaction with them, even if you're in the Aryan Brotherhood and they're in the Black Panthers or whatever. You can still
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
a neutral ground, because sometimes you have to parley with people regardless of how you feel about them. And
There's often a mutual respect too, isn't there, between folks of that, if it's like, especially amongst men, where it's, we know the deal, who that person is and who I might be or what have you, different tribes, but nevertheless, there's a mutual respect, I think, that's had.
And I'm about to put up a video about going to an Israeli's house and interacting with him and his family very positively, even though we are on different sides of things. And so that's just one example of how it's possible to do it. But in any case, people don't want to open themselves to experience. As I said, that's a big problem. And I think you have to force yourself sometime, and people don't like to force themselves. It's like eating something new or doing something different, or, in general, like just to talk about a related topic today, I got a load of testicles in from the vet clinic. And
Yeah.
the lady's saying, and I said, how is it that you do all kinds of stuff with animals and you have a problem with testicles? She said, I just can't stand them. It's like, it's like, why not? It's not a big deal to eat them. Your disgust factor cannot be that big of a it can't be that big of a deal to you.
It's
But
just meat.
exactly.
Right.
If you didn't know what it was, you'd eat it, So I don't understand. And we're talking about somebody who's around, a vet clinic all the time and processing animals and stuff. And
Oh, like she's squeamish about it? Is that what you mean?
about eating testicles. And I'm saying, open yourself to the experience. That's what I'm saying. And sometimes you have to force yourself. And sometimes when you get into this stuff, you do throw up sometimes, but then you just go
Yeah.
back and do it again. And you get used to it. And that's the bottom line with not just eating stuff, but doing stuff, like you haven't given up bicycle riding because you had a bad experience,
Right.
your fasted ride, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. You have a broke ass all the way through the Katy Trail. And that's the worst part about it. But that ain't stopping me. Or even folks that, like, some of these alpine climbers, where people died on their watch or they almost died getting lost in the woods. Did that stop them from doing it the next day? No, like it's not as much of a deterrent. I'm not likening my experience to that. That's hardcore, right? Maybe I'll get there at some point.
Well, something that I have always hated and struggled with is doing auto mechanics, and I have forced myself to spend literally hundreds of hours with mechanics, learning more about engines and stuff. So I still hate doing the work, and I still use mechanics. And you've seen firsthand my lack of mechanical ability, but
I'm the same way, and it's embarrassing too when you're the guy that doesn't understand what's under the hood, and I kick myself for not listening to my dad at the time. I was too busy with my, other things to care to listen, and I'm having to make up for lost time now, but is that going to stop us from learning it? It's not. It's just more of a kick in the ass to, seek out the information.
Yeah, so it's just a continuous process of which I continue to force myself to spend 2 or 3 hours at a time with the mechanic on projects, no matter how terrible that is to my time, I need to learn. There's
Yeah.
you can't just learn the things you want to learn in life. That's a big problem people have, I think.
I was thinking about it. I was thinking that part of me wants to be a bit. I'm trying to find the word. When it comes to those who fall into the specialization is for insects sort of pipeline, there's this tendency to sort of for me to sort of dogpile on that individual, right? Like,
Yeah.
as we've sort of alluded to that just now. But then it's also, there's a part of me that goes, well, can you blame them because they've gone through this conveyor belt, right, of K through 12, this sort of, boys have to be well behaved, they're on Ritalin and they're just put in these little boxes, right? And then there's this expectation that you then go straight into college. You don't get lost and you don't get dirty and you don't, oh, by the way, yeah, and kids just can't go out and sort of venture forth. So there's already this priming phenomenon that's happening where it's you're going to pick a major, and that major, that college major, that's your specialization. And I've seen it. I worked in DC for a good while, in the Beltway, and there's these folks, they just know what they've learned in college, which is a very like it's a, they're going to be the lawyer, they're going to be the poli sci. Well, the thing about that, and you've been in the political realm, so it's kind of funny. You've probably witnessed this. All these poli sci graduates that think they somehow have they've got this forbidden knowledge that the rest of the world hasn't figured out, and therefore they must be granted the keys to the castle and tell everyone how to live. And it's like, get in line. There's 500,000 other poli sci graduates that are in for a rude awakening. So this, and I've seen this, and then you talk to these folks, and it's they would brag that they don't cook at home. They just, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, they just eat out every time. And this isn't, I dined out quite a bit myself. But I'll tell you, there was also a lot of home cooking, and I always got out there and cooked. But these folks, they'll tell you they've never cooked for themselves. I've seen it, and my Latino brothers, I'm sorry, some of you guys, you're little princes in the family and you don't know how to do your own laundry. I've had to teach a couple of y'all how to do your own laundry. Or should I say, my Latina bride had to teach you how to do your own laundry, grown men, right? And it's, you find that, like, that really this specialization is for insects concept, it very much is alive and well here, where these folks, they outsource darn near everything, and they're just on a one track sort of it's a one track lifestyle, and very little beyond that.
Well, I think everybody has a lack of intellectual curiosity. And to your point on the political science majors and other people, what I realized years ago is, I bring up an author, and this is to people in my family or in academics or whatever. And let's use a random example that actually happened. Thomas Carlyle, and I said, yeah, I read Thomas Carlyle. And he said, oh, I read the Taylor Retailored, Sartor or Restartus or whatever. And I realized, I started looking at it, that's on the official reading list. That's your people only read what's on the college reading list.
Yeah.
And it's like, you don't really know Carlyle if you read one book or two book on
Yeah.
the reading list. you have to read, multiple. Let's say you read 5 books, you might know something about an author, not the one book that's on the accepted reading list.
Yeah, and they always choose the worst of the author's output, like Nathaniel Hawthorne's Scarlet Letter. I hate that book. But I love Nathaniel Hawthorne. I love his other stuff. I would have probably, yeah. I mean, I just got to say, like, and then Steinbeck, The Pearl. It's about a dead baby, like a child dies, and like it's this misanthropic stuff, dude. And it's like, what happened to the stories of triumph and like the old 19th century stuff that's just rife with virtues. It's like it's just all misanthropic, nihilistic stuff.
Yeah,
Anyway, sorry,
I
I
think
took
they
it from you.
definitely intended to curate the reading lists to have nihilistic and misanthropic stuff, but I think it also appeals to young people, at least in the recent past, who are often nihilistic, misanthropic, and anti-natalistic.
Yeah.
And why are you laughing? Is this about the game or this? On both? She doesn't want to. She doesn't want to elucidate. But I guess she's laughing at me because I'm anti-natalist, but just for me. But it's not born out of nihilism. But anyway, that's the extent. And people do feel lifted up because they've read the approved reading list, and I don't know why there's no curiosity in society today, but it's odd.
I guess it goes back to again, can you blame them when they're told this is what you do, and there's no. Let me ask you this. I kind of wish Richard Barrett was on here. He might be able to add some to this bit, but I want to ask you, do you see a difference between the homeschooled crowd and the public schooled crowd? I don't want to give a total black eye to public school, because there are kids that thrive in the environment. I've got to make that clear, right?
Well,
But I
one
do see some differences.
I I had a more of an interaction with homeschool kids as an adult than I did as a homeschool kid because I didn't interact with other homeschool
you
kids.
were on an
I
island.
didn't like homeschool kids because they didn't read books by adults, and I was more interested in reading adult books, not adult content in the sense that it was X-rated, but just adult books. I wanted to, read serious works. I read Atlas Shrugged over 2 years when I was from 10 to 12. It took me
Yeah.
2 years to read it. But the point is not to brag on my own, sophistication. I'm just saying I didn't want to be around the kids that were not as advanced readers as I was. It's not to say I
Yeah.
was that great, but the point is, as an adult, I saw a lot of homeschool kids working with them, and my view was my mentor William Roberts would point out different families of homeschool kids to me and say, "You see, this family actually encourages intellectual curiosity, and this family doesn't." He would
Yeah.
point out specific families,
Yeah.
and in both those families turned out great kids. But I would say the happier adult kids now are the ones that were intellectually curious and
Yeah.
pursued a lot of hobbies, and which are hobbies are like what we're talking about. They turn into creative pastimes and experiences, and interests that a broad range of interests and a broad range of things to do, be it music or different types of sports or learning different trades and different talents. Just knowledge seeking, she says.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the ones that didn't, they're not as happy. They did very well scholastically, but they're just not as happy. They don't have families of their own yet, even though they're in the same age group, as these other kids. Some of these kids have 2 or 3 children now. I say kids; they're in their middle 20s now. That
Hmm.
I observed 15 years ago when they were in their early teens, and they have established families, married, whatever. And the other ones are academically successful and have jobs, but they are not happy in life. It appears to me from the ones I'm using as thinking back and thinking about.
Yeah, and the reason why I asked that is, when you were talking about curated reading lists, right? There's also a curation of experiences as well. And when I think part of it is, time is such a precious commodity, right? And so I do wonder when a person is freed up or a child is freed up, um, especially when they're out in the middle of nowhere, like in our situation, oh, they're going to figure out something to do and get into. And it's almost like it's something where, my wife and we both came from, we weren't homeschooled ourselves. So we would try to sort of take the wheel almost too much, right? And then it was over time, it was kind of like, wait a minute, these kids are doing all kinds of stuff in the in between periods and learning how to do the baking. And then they're doing this and they're, doing this experiment and they're, you know, and it's like, well, you kind of got to just let them do that. And so I wonder if it's more a matter of, um, providing the environment and I guess, the inertia by which the child will, and the resources by which they can explore their hobbies and interests. And it seems like you were kind of your experience, just in talking with you the last few times, your homeschool experience, you were kind of left to your own devices,
No,
relatively
not at
speaking.
all.
Oh, you weren't. Oh,
But
okay. I
I,
misread then.
I no, well, I was. They tried to do it right. It just didn't take with me, and I did my own thing.
Yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
we had standardized hours of school. I was expected to meet tests, and I just never did well at any of it. The only thing I ever did well at was reading books on my own. And so I don't think unschooling or a less structured environment works for everybody, but I think it worked for some people. And I will add, there's one case that just comes to mind that I was just at their house the other day of a lady who elected to unschool her kids about 6, 7 years ago, and now they're in their middle teens. And it seemed I kind of sneered at it at the time because I'm aware of unschooling and how
Yeah.
it works. But her
I'm
daughter,
even pretty, yeah. I even like
her
can't,
daughters are
yeah.
meeting with a measure of success in life,
Yeah.
and they're both, I think, very well developed people in the
Yeah.
sense she gave them the opportunity to do things and was a very hands-on mom, stay-at-home mom, and they definitely have their faults, but they're pretty good young ladies, and pretty
And that,
well. They were able to transition to successful employment and have opportunities and have basically careers, even though they didn't. I think they graduated some level of high school, but like I said, she unschooled them the last 5, 6 years. So
yeah. And that's something where it would be really hard for us to just completely give up the dials,
yeah,
right, to the kids, and then, biblically too, you don't want the kids to run the house. And so
yeah,
there's that piece, there but some kids, maybe that's the answer. Other kids, they need, they need a boot on their neck, you know what I'm saying? Others, it's more of a balance, striking a balance. But just in thinking through this specialization is for insects, um I, I'm
I
wondering if it's just there's just there's just this over sort of, modularization, this curricular sort of these what do you call it, these there's just too much of the curation. I'm just going to go with your word, curation, throughout a person's life, that when they become when they become adults themselves, they're almost sort of looking to an authority to tell them what to do, or they've got their one track mind, and they're not able to fully seize all the opportunities as they present themselves, perhaps. Or maybe I'm just, maybe
Well,
that's a misread.
I agree with you, and I'll just put in a plug because I haven't got to talk about this in a long time. My mentor, William Roberts, he was not a proponent of homeschooling. He believed that the best system for America, based on the constitutional republic and the, public assembly, was the one-room schoolhouse. He believed that was
Yeah.
the proper dynamic for people teaching students. You put everybody in one room and make them learn and make them compete and teach them. And what I've seen lately, because I've been paying more attention to the Amish schools. Now, the Amish only go through 8th grade. And
Mm-hmm.
this one kid was telling me, the Amish kid, the other day, he said, I was the smartest guy in my school. They made me leave after the 8th grade. They said there was nothing more I could learn. And he's actually kind of an indolent guy for an Amish guy. He's more like the Pennsylvania Amish. But I was telling my wife the other day, I sent him for something like right across the house, like across the room. And I was distracted by doing something. And it's like, where did he go? He was like 5 minutes bringing this one item, this one tool back to me. It's like I didn't lose my temper, but I almost lost my temper. It's like, where are you, you inbred so and so? Which they're not inbred at all, but it's just they work very hard to avoid inbreeding. But the point of the matter is, his brother is entirely the opposite. He's a self-starter and very engaged. He graduated early from the Amish school and went to work and has learned 3 trades already. Is a heavy equipment operator and does a variety of jobs. But the point is, the one-room schoolhouse enables everybody to take their own route depending on their means of study.
Do you know what I like about that? I like that you're pairing up. You got the older kids who can help mentor. Just there's this idea of osmosis, right? You've got a younger kid who, just by being around older kids, more seasoned, they kind of pick up things a little bit higher up on the food chain, right, above their pay grade, so to speak, and vice versa. And then maybe the slower kid and the kid that's kind of off on some other plane, just the prodigy, so to speak. They're all together and they're all learning from each other in their different capacities. I think, and I think about it, the child who's bundled up with a whole bunch of kids, 29, other kids, same age and maturity. I don't know if that's, how much do they actually get of the more seasoned perspective, be it the teacher, the teacher's assistant, or, the elders in the tribe or the clan, right? So that kind of appeals to me.
Well, obviously they don't teach properly in schools anymore. And that's, like I said, on that. But I've seen this work on other levels, like at the boxing gym, where you have 10, 15 kids between, 6 and 25 guys. And you have to pair guys up according to experience and knowledge and find the ones that are older and are able to work with the younger ones to bring them along without diminishing their skills by not being, not having somebody to push them. In other words,
That's differentiation, I believe.
and that's what I've seen with various coaches being good at reading the room and pairing up people, which teachers can't do in the classroom for projects. That's discriminatory.
Right.
And
Yep. Yep. Yep.
but so I've learned. So I think we've shut our eyes. Like the part of your brain that is supposed to determine character, not your brain personally, but the teacher's brain, has been shut off because they're not allowed to study character and size up people like
Yeah.
in the old days. Like
Yeah.
the idea of this one room schoolhouse and everybody is on learning different things, and you have to work to manage everybody. And it's doable because I see it happen in the gym all the time, with coaches managing classes and keeping everybody occupied and busy. And you can do it. It was done for thousands of years in the classrooms, by one teacher teaching kids from 0 to 18.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But
Well, I also, going back to the families, right? Each family's different. So, and each school is different. And I think of charter schools as well, where charter schools get a bad rap. If you ask me, it's like they just want to throw it out because I think the argument amongst sort of the public school supporters, the more zealous, is that charter schools takes precious funding away from the public schools. But I've always looked fondly, I've always sort of, and I ended up graduating high school through a charter school. I really failed out of my public school. It was just not for me. I hated it. And then the last ditch effort, I just walked into a, charter school and I'm like, help me. And all of a sudden that last year, man, they just gave me like work packets. They gave me full courses that I could do at home, correspondence courses. And I come in, only when I need to take a test. And I just blew through it, all A's, and graduated. And it's like, how did I go from D's and F's for
so
years
do you
and
feel they
hating my
challenged
life?
you more?
What's that?
Do you feel they challenged you more?
I felt I got more out of it. I was actually interested in the material, the independent study way.
Yeah.
And so I just, something happened there with me where I was just really a fan of more of an independent study sort of option for maybe for people like me. I don't know. And my daughter, I see it in her quite a bit. The eldest, she's definitely her own, you know, she's her own person, and it's been a joy working with her. But what I see with charter schools is that there can be some real crappy ones, and there could be some real good ones, and the crappy ones go out of business ultimately. It's I think it infuses a bit of a good competitive spirit amongst these institutions of learning. I think it's much needed. Otherwise you're just going to see this staleness that um, permeates the whole of the industry, or of the sector. I think you need some entities to shake things up. And so I see that with charter schools, and they also have it. If you fail to perform, you're gone.
Yeah.
And you don't get that with a lot of these state schools, unfortunately. Now I'm sure there are good state schools. I'm sure there are good public schools. I'm not, claiming that. I definitely, you could probably see that my perspective is how it's colored ultimately. But I've since matured in my thinking, and I see that every institution, we got to look at individually, and and I like the idea of options.
Yeah.
Tyler, I'm going to say, I think what you're describing with you and your daughter is child-led learning.
What's that?
Child-led learning.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Yes.
child-led learning. Yeah,
I'll say one thing about public school, and nobody's going to agree with me, and that's okay. The public school system is only good as the parents sending their kids to it.
yeah. I could.
Well,
Do do you see? do- I've always argued that no matter where the child is ultimately placed, the parents absolutely have to be involved.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Did you see that personally? The outcomes, resultant of the level of the parents' involvement with the child.
I did. I saw it with myself, my siblings, and then my two children. Yeah.
Yeah.
And their friends. I saw, the kids that really struggled were the same kids who I was personally going and picking up and taking to ball practices and ball games. And, I coached the same kids on for 2 years in baseball and never met their parents. Those
Wow.
were the same kids that were struggling through school.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I
You
don't
so you almost filled potentially you could have filled a void for those kids.
absolutely because they wouldn't have been able to participate in sports had I not been there to travel with them. But I couldn't be there academically because their parents would have had to sign stuff over.
Yeah.
And again, public schools are only as good as the parents that send their kids there.
Yeah, I think well, certainly the parents who are invested in the kids know what their kids are learning or should be, right?
Right.
And if they're not, well then if there's nothing to talk about, if there's nothing to push back on, then if there are problems with the curriculum, it's certainly not going to be addressed by a parent body who's really interested, who's just using it to, as a glorified daycare service, Yeah.
yeah,
I heard a comment once from a kid that they assumed their kid just wasn't very smart. And that broke my heart because I knew the kid. The kid was fine. The kid just
Yeah.
needed some support.
I think too, there are some people who aren't that bright, right? And that's okay. They can still have something. I know that sounds terrible,
Oh,
but it is true. And but there's still something that they could be good at, that they can thrive in. And maybe going back to the specialization, maybe there is a specialization for these sorts.
there always,
Um,
you just have to work to find it.
yeah, yeah. I believe that. I've actually always believed
And
that.
that's where a public school can be good because they have the resources if the parent gets involved.
Right. How often would a slower kid or a kid with an intellectual disability or what have you, how often would they just sort of be, if they weren't in that environment, the public school environment with the resources, would they just kind of be relegated to sit in the corner, like you see in some third world countries where it's just that child is just sort of almost possessing, they're almost sort of they're almost ostracized in a
Well,
sense.
they're going to be the ones sitting on corners.
Yeah, right.
Nobody's ever going to teach them anything else.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see that. Some families just may not be equipped either, or understand, how to deal with it.
well, I think intelligence is overrated in a lot of things in the sense that the kids that hold down corners as adults and later on the last couple of days, it's interesting. I've seen a lot of homeless people moving around in the warmer weather, and I've been watching them. And I see different people every day. There's one guy camped on this corner, but the point of the matter is that it's a certain inertia they have in their lives. So a person that's not very intelligent but has some energy will try hard, and a desire to try and some curiosity will try and get noticed and accomplish things beyond their intellectual level. Whereas I really think with a lot of people, it's just their disinterest in doing anything at all that leads them to fall behind. And that could be motivation from the parents is lacking, or, they just come from a line of people who are not very motivated in general and apathetic towards life, which leads them to that position. Because I look at these street people, like the latest thing is they have easy chairs, not easy chairs, but what do you call those? Lawn chairs. They're holding signs in lawn chairs. And it's like, and I actually had this experience once because I put these guys out to beg, to humiliate them, and I said, I want you guys to make cardboard signs while I'm out. I took them to the job place to, what is that? Where you can get a job, a temporary
Home
job.
Depot. Home Depot.
Well, no, a temp agency. I took them to
Yeah,
a temp
I got you.
agency.
Yeah.
And then I said the rest of the day, I went to Dollar General and got some cardboard and markers. The rest of the day, I want you to go stand by this overpass and beg. So,
Yeah.
so you don't waste any time at all, because the jobs are coming, but in the meantime, you can stand here and beg. They're sitting down in the grass, not even holding up their signs. It's like that kind of stuff. But that's what I'm talking about, is the apathy. Whereas there's always something you can do to make money aside from, apathetically holding up a sign. And I feel like those people are just naturally that way.
I see it among sort of the wealthier youth, the ones where mom and dad always had money around, and there's this job avoidance, where their intent is to stay in higher education as long as they possibly can, and sort of just mooch off of mom and dad, and just it's actually kind of sad. It's like you've squandered your life away, essentially. You just haven't. I don't know. Maybe some people are okay with that, with not leaving behind something. I guess I don't know.
The wealthy,
But
I don't
then
know.
you find others. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I feel like a lot of wealthy people deny their kids autonomy, which makes them more apathetic. So I think it's very important to force kids into autonomy very young, and make them have as much independence as they can handle, which is, again, a matter of calibration, because
Yeah.
not every kid can. But making them do their own laundry and do all this stuff, and be as self-reliant as they possibly can handle.
And by the way, this is baseline stuff we've been talking about thus far. We haven't even gone beyond to, seizing all the grand hobbies out there, and in larger pursuits. This is doing your laundry. This is cooking, breakfast, and but there's a lot of folks that can't do it. They just live life sort of, I don't know. There's one function or.
Well,
But
I'll tell this anecdote about rich people and overeducated rich people who don't do anything. It's like, I went out. I was at a billionaire's country place and talking to the manager, and who lives in the guest house, right? And the family from the billionaire came out and said they were just fiending for bacon, and it's like they did not supply themselves in the house, and they were asking the manager if she had any in her fridge, because it's like 11 o'clock, almost noon. They just woke up, but it's like, you're one of the wealthiest families in the world, and not in the world, but billionaire family. Okay, billionaire family, well known. If I said the name, you'd know it. And you have no bacon in your house? Like, what's going on? And
Was
or
this
why
down
don't
in
you
Arkansas? Because I could probably
why
fit
don't you have Butler go get some bacon or do something? I mean, what's the point of being rich if you're asking your
yeah,
uh, your grounds manager who lives in a little cottage behind your big house for bacon? You know
yeah,
that
yeah.
that really drove home a point. But to your earlier point about hobbies, people don't have hobbies anymore. I've noticed this. We can
Yeah,
take the Scouts, for example. Now, they're
yeah.
not Boy Scouts anymore, but I've noticed this with all the Scouts. They don't have as many pursuits young Scouts can engage in to earn their
Let,
merit
let me,
badges for basic stuff.
over the years, you know, I've dragged my wife and others along, of course, over the years. Like, I'll go to these meetups, like Master Gardener meetup or the Historical Society over here, the Preservation Club, the Mahjong Players Club. I'll go to these things. I'll tell you what, and then Corkball's the latest. I'm going to get in with these guys. I'm telling you, but I'll tell you what, like they see me and they're like they swarm me like fresh blood, because they're all in their 60s, all these clubs, these are older folks, and it's kind of it's sad because it's these clubs will die out, simply. But and then all you're going to have is like the anime and hedonism clubs, and the
Well,
or
that's a
or
good
what have
point.
you.
I
Like,
was going to do a video on this because millennials are now acting restive, and it's like the boomers are monopolizing everything. Well, there's a reason they're monopolizing everything because you're engaged in your childish pursuits. Let's take Toastmasters, which I'm
right.
sure you're familiar with.
I need to get in on that. I've never actually participated. I need to
Well,
get
I'm
in.
just saying that's one
Yeah.
example. There's no one under 45 in Toastmasters. That's just
Yeah.
one example. You
And how,
mentioned a lot of good ones.
dude, how enriching is it too to go to these? I always get jazzed when I'm at one of these that people are, you learn so much. There's like this little model train museum nearby, and I've been in there and there's like 9 dudes in their 60s and 70s that they just spurg out on these trains, and they're all about showing you that, and the way they're about it too is they're like, come follow me, and they take you behind everything, and then they open this door and you're like under the thing, and you like he's showing you all the secret behind the scenes stuff behind this massive train metropolis, and you're geeking out over it, just being around people like that, even though model trains aren't my thing. Just, I like being around people like that, and you gain something, and you're not one of these wretched specialists that Heinlein warns us about.
Yeah, it's so many different fields. Be it the little music groups, which are dying out, playing classical music amongst themselves, and
Yeah,
just little things, and or just 1,000 different hobbies that nobody wants to engage in, and people do engage in them in small groups all across the country and in the hinterland, that are kind of dying out, because people want to play anime, or I don't guess you don't play anime, watch anime, and sit in the house. And there are plenty of social interactions you can have in these different groups. And regarding the train deal, I'm so familiar with it, I can smell it when you talk about it. If
yeah,
you,
yeah. Or have you gotten into that, or you've been around people
I
that have?
have, I have the low grade autism for trains. You know,
Yeah. Well,
almost.
these guys definitely got my spurg juices flowing.
Yeah, I have a thing for trains.
Yeah, they're pretty cool. I mean,
Uh,
shoot. That's
one,
one specialty young person I get into. Just get in with the train systems, man. Just be a train conductor. Who even thinks about doing that anymore? That's a good job. That's a good
yeah,
career. And just
you
stay
want
there and don't do
to,
anything else.
My high school band director, who ended up being my first husband's very best friend, is a trained nut. He
Yeah.
has a full-on Civil War era trained conductor's outfit.
What?
Goes to Eureka Springs on the weekends that he's not doing work stuff and drives the little train you can buy tickets.
That's so gangster. I love that.
I mean, he's done hours and hours so that he can do the train by himself now.
And that gentleman is his wife left him because of all his hobbies, but he is a man of many parts. I have not met him personally, like shook his hand, but I have been on the field with him. He is also, besides being a musician and training nerd, a Civil War reenactor with an expertise on cannons specifically.
Oh man, okay, so that's one of your guys. That's in your orbit for sure. That's in your house. The Civil War stuff.
And this is where I want to bring this up because this is where two different hobbies can complement one another.
Yeah.
Regardless of what they are. His musical ability, he's an orchestra leader and this and that, classical musician. What is he at the university?
He's a
band director. But anyways, he made a system where he got all the cannon synchronized to fire simultaneously, which is very hard to do. But he pulled this off, causing my horse to go into hysterics. But I saw that as a blending of musical theory and artillery background. So he used his two hobbies together, and this was actually quite a feat. Not everybody recognized how special it was. People who are familiar with artillery, usually they fire guns one at a time.
Yeah.
Or they fire them in groups. He got the whole field of art guns to go off simultaneously, which is extraordinary precision. The precision based on his musical ability.
Well, there you go. If he was a specialist and he was just a trained guy, he wouldn't be able to synchronize, or he wouldn't be able to meld those very disciplines together. And that's just it too. I've seen that as well. You know, I've seen it where I think you just like opened up a whole other sort of channel in this. Is that's exactly it. The more you know about different things, you're able to create these relationships between skill sets and produce some pretty awesome stuff.
Yeah.
You know, like truly, that's where some of the best stuff originates, isn't it? And I'm sure there's countless people throughout history where their very disciplines come into the picture. I mean, I'm sure a whole series of books can be written on the very thing.
Well, and again, this comes from the term, as well as we're talking about Renaissance man, in the sense that all those guys in the Renaissance period, like Michelangelo, were good at a dozen things. Michelangelo was a blacksmith. He was known for his extraordinary strength. He was a painter as well as being a sculptor, and I'm leaving out a bunch of things. And then his contemporary, of course, Benvenuto Cellini, who wrote his memoirs. I don't know if you've read them. They're quite engaging. He was involved in all kinds of different pursuits, and that's why he wrote his memoirs, the memoirs of Benvenuto Cellini, which are still, well known to this day. And I do recommend them to the public because he had so many different adventures, doing so many different things in the course of his life. He was one of the first guys to write a memoir about all his experiences and all the people he met in his life in Renaissance Italy and all the things he did. And, that he was like Michelangelo and Donatello, a lot of those guys, a master of many trades.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And think of how you'd have to, as a sculptor, you'd really have to understand the human physique, the anatomy behind it. And there's so many other areas in science where you have to have some understanding of an adjacent or even far removed or wholly separate branch of science in order to kind of see beyond.
Yeah, you have to definitely have not algebra. What's not algebra and geometry? What's the next step up? Trigonometry and so forth and so on. So I like to use the example of John Ford, who was a Texas Ranger and known as a Western man, but he started out as a doctor who then became a lawyer and a surveyor and went on to become a Civil War general and ended up running the whole as an elderly man. He was put in charge of the state homes for the orphans and the disabled, because at that time they had state homes for those people, and ended up getting involved with them and finding cottage industries that they could participate in to make money, the blind and the deaf and so on in the state home. So he was involved in so many different things as a historian, as a did all kinds of things in his life besides being a Texas Ranger and a soldier. But the point of it is, it was based on mathematics.
Yeah.
For him, for the most part, and which enabled him to do surveying and all these other things.
What's with it with mathematicians in that there's some folks that they're not known as mathematicians, but that's where their lodestone resides. It's in they're a mathematics teacher or scholar, but then you've got Lewis Carroll, right? Where do we know him from? Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. He was a mathematics guy and a logician, a big time logician, right? Then you have Edwin A. Abbott. I believe he was a he was a Christian. What was it? What's the specific branch? What's the King's? Oh man. Oh, what do you call it? Anglican. He was an Anglican, right? But he was a math teacher or math professor, I believe I forget which university, but he wrote Flatland: A Romance of Many Dimensions, which is heralded as a significant science fiction. It's timeless, right? Classic, a writer. These guys are writers. Then you have, and I'm trying to get my buddy to get on a broadcast, my buddy Cameron White, who knows a lot about this. There's James A. Garfield, U.S. president, president for 6 months. He got assassinated. And he came up with his own theorem based off of, it was his own sort of Pythagorean theorem. And I am not the big math guy, but my buddy Cameron is. I'd like for him to talk specifically about Garfield's math past. It's very fascinating that you've got this guy who's maybe a genius in this area, but we don't know him as that. Something about mathematicians, they kind of venture out. They're interdisciplinary, aren't they?
Well, another example I would add to your list is the comedian Norm Macdonald, who actually wrote several books on mathematics under a assumed name and was a mathematician. He was basically a comedian to serve his gambling habit.
Yeah.
He was a mathematician, trained mathematician who wrote books on mathematics.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
That's wow. I'm even looking. So I was thinking of Rowan Atkinson, Mr. Bean. Apparently he's one of like the, smartest. He's like Mensa grade, and he plays a bumbling idiot. That's what he's known for, But, he had, what is he? He was doctoral student in electrical engineering at Oxford University, dropped out to pursue his comedy career, holds the Master of Science in Electrical Engineering from Oxford. That's so funny, right? Mr. Bean, of all people, is like, apparently he's like extremely intelligent. But
for me, Rowan Atkinson will always be Blackadder, and so I can see him as being really smart.
Yeah, that's funny. So that's who you see him as. Yeah.
I mean, that's my favorite. And then what was the other series?
He's just great in everything, honestly. Everything I've seen of him is hilarious. Johnny English, but it's an aside, yeah.
I was just gonna say, I'm no mathematician by any means, but I see math in everything. I see
Yeah.
in loading the dishwasher. I see it in everything, and I get confused when other people don't do that.
Yeah. It
Well,
matters in everything. Yeah. The golden ratio, the spirals, you see it in nature, the fractal, and yet very well, like organized. And I mean, it's God's good design ultimately. God is the ultimate mathematician.
she is good at math. She's an accountant. But I will say something as someone who is not good at math and never learned math because he refused to. But I do a lot of measuring in my profession. And one thing I've learned from measuring so many times over the years is that the feet of the animals changes sizes throughout the seasons and the years. And that's a
Oh,
fascinating, kind of fascinating deal that I've never seen in the veterinary textbooks or the
you
other
mean
way.
morphologically speaking, like they actually physically change size to
Yes.
adapt to the present
Yeah.
season? Is that what you mean? Oh,
Not a
wow.
great deal, not a great deal, but they change size throughout the seasons. And what's that's come from is regularly measuring them and noting it over the years. And not they change by the seasons. They change about 3 times a year, size wise. But again, that's from not only measuring them every month, every 2 months, but also noting it down. So this is not a just a casual
Yeah.
observance. I've
Yeah.
been noting it down for years now, and it's cut to a point. But I would never have noticed that if I weren't measuring and recording the measurements on a variety of animals, and breeds and sizes and so on. So I can tell you for a fact that happens, and that's a observance I've never seen in any recorded documents.
Yeah, it's mathematically, it can be mathematically backed as well.
Yeah.
I've done computer programming for a number of years, and again, master of none. That about says it. I'm not, the super dev, but I can get by a little bit. And I found that you really there's this sort of mimicry when you're developing a program or a game. I've done some game development where I've built out worlds and whatnot, and in doing so there's sort of this mimicry of the natural world around us, and there's rules. And so I suspect that just as in your field and just as in your observations, Leanna, and just in Lewis Carroll's observations in his logician world, mathematic world, and these others, you see. I think it's very complementary to math is very complementary to other disciplines, and you're able to see things. You're able to see the math in things, like you said, Leanna, and you're able to sort of see things and be able to express things. It almost heightens um, your other faculties, or it almost heightens your ability to express these things, perhaps in the written word or artistically or what have you. There's plenty of art that's very fractal, that's very beautiful, that's very, the great artists, there's math in their work. I mean, so they
I
follow rules based. There's rules in this existence.
I think a lot of writing is based on pattern recognition. For
Yeah.
example, animals move in circles. That's the way they live. What's interesting from the mathematical perspective is to study the circles and
Mm.
quantify them mathematically, which I don't know that that's been done. Maybe it has been. I'm not a high level on bio.
Well, there's a migratory stuff with the
Yeah.
tracking, right?
Well,
So,
yeah, but I'm just talking about their day to day life. Animals just move in circles all day long, every
wow.
day. That's the whole life of an animal.
So
Is a
do
circle.
plants, right?
Yeah,
So do plants. Yeah.
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 And just the different circles, though, is what's interesting. The diameter, the circumference, all these math,
How it changes with the season.
how it changes with the seasons. Yeah, but they're all measurable. And so that's an area of mathematics that a mathematician might be familiar with and develop patterns from, which then he wants to basically put into stories or ways of communicating them to the public, other than just saying animals move in circles. You could make a whole story around that for a particular circle or a particular time, or why
Base a whole book.
or why it's why they're doing
Yeah.
that, so it's just an endless array
Yeah.
of concepts available to somebody who understands mathematics.
Yeah, so you could render that phenomenon into via a different medium. And so in this case, it would be Lewis Carroll's Jabberwocky, or it would be what have you. It'd be one of Michelangelo's creations, or what, who knows? I mean, but that rendering, that effect of taking what's observable in the world and then rendering it onto the page. Yeah. I wanted to, so I wanted to ask you, you mentioned something. So you mentioned this fellow the train enthusiast. I know we're kind of going back in time a bit here, but it was kind of on my mind. So the train enthusiast, he lost his love, right? His wife or girlfriend or what have you. Do you all see that with hobbyists? Do you see this sort of, could that be a deterrent from, do you think can that sort of thing, that sort of shaming, because I've seen that as well, there's sort of a shaming that occurs, or let's be real, hobbies too take up a lot of time, so it's not exactly copacetic with some mates, although it could with others. But what do y'all think of that?
She's thinking about it.
I think when the fourth kid came around and he was gone for 3 out of 4 weekends, she was done.
Oh, so okay, so he got way into it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, they all had, all of them, even the baby when he came around. And she was a seamstress, so she could build literally period perfect clothing.
Wow.
They all had period perfect clothing, and she still makes his stuff for him to this day. Clothing, and like the whole family had period perfect clothing. And until the kid came around, he required them all to go every time.
He what?
He required them all to go every time he went somewhere.
For you're saying for the train stuff, is that what you mean?
The reenactments. He also was really active into, he went all across the state refurbishing Confederate cemeteries.
Yeah.
And they did it in period correct clothing. So they went like a family.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah, it really was a beautiful thing. If it was also your passion, if it wasn't, it was miserable.
But
right.
When you look at how the kids turned out, they're all very performative theater types with unique hobbies of their own.
Yes.
Maybe not similar to his, but they have hobbies, divergent hobbies that most people don't have anymore.
That's something I've learned is there's been times where I've sort of pushed my hobbies and my interests on my family, and I've since, they're pretty transparent with me when it's like, all right, Dad, I'm not interested in I'm not interested in the Three Stooges or whatever it is, right? Whatever, fill in the blank. And so I'll back off, and not make it all about me. I'll, try like kid-centered learning, like you said, Leanna, to, all right, we do my silly thing, but then, of course we also do your stuff, and kind of distribute it out. So I guess for anyone who's has a tendency to get wrapped up into the hobbies, I guess it's it's one of those things where you still have people in your life, and I mean, if you want a wife and kids, probably best to to keep that in mind, that not everyone's way into what you're into, and that can cause a rift, I suppose. But in this case, in this case, this family's case, it seems like there was some great benefit to be had in terms of the wife's ability to be a seamstress, right? To make these ornate clothes. So both hobbies were being fed, but maybe his sort of eclipsed hers over time without knowing them. Of course, it's an interesting case study, though.
Right. And I think what would have been the best benefit ever, and this is from talking to both of them, is if they had calendar shared. Like if, she really loved, there was a group of women that would get together and they would make Southern ball gowns for the dances.
Yeah.
Not like the Confederate thing, but there was some other stuff that she was interested in. And if they would just have like compared calendars, and then she, one weekend a month, if she would say, "Hey, we have this going on this weekend, can we go to this instead?" Because she had to give up going to most of those to go to his things.
Yeah.
So, the give and take that is necessary in every relationship, be it professional or personal.
Yeah.
I think that would have saved a lot of heartache.
Yeah, for sure. The
And
other thing that, oh, sorry, keep going.
I was going to say that the kicker here is hobbies are great. And if you had shared hobbies, it's even greater. But make sure that the shared hobbies are really as shared as you think they are.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's good women out there that'll follow you, they'll follow you wherever you might go, but
They need a break.
it can lose its allure, right?
But they need a break once in a while.
Yeah, yeah. It can lose its allure for sure. Yeah. The other thing that came to mind as we were talking, and I'd like to hear if you guys had any sparks of different sort of capillaries we could, go through. But one of them is, have you noticed there's some families, a lot, sort of more Asian families, I'll say, different cultures where dad is a dentist and by God, or he's a heart doctor and by God, so will be the son, or and that's where that specialization thing comes into it. And have you seen that in play? I'm sure it's even here on this continent, right? It's amongst Europeans descendants as well. What's that thing all about? That's got to be, I mean, that's got to be rough, like say you don't have that interest in that specialty, and then you're being expected to be ball and chain to that very thing because that's just how it's been, throughout for your family.
Yeah, but that was your decision. She said she's a third generation accountant.
But that's all I knew anybody ever to do.
But I don't really see that deal going on outside of Generation X more recently. I don't see it. I could be wrong about this. That's my personal anecdotal thought, is I haven't seen parents pushing their children, specifically their sons, to succeed them, because I actually wouldn't mind seeing more of it in some professions, but it just doesn't work anymore because people are so much less homogenous than they used to be. But I just haven't seen it. That's my perspective on it.
Do you think there's merits to it? Because often it's spoken in the context of it's a bad thing, like we've got that goofy Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer movie with the little claymation figures, and you got the elf who just wants to be a dentist, he doesn't want to be an elf, and so that's like the messaging, right? But is it actually kind of a good thing to have these guardrails and these expectations that are imposed upon the youth? I wonder.
Well, I think it's like the poet thing. The only reason it's gotten a bad rap is because of all the poets whose dads forced them to be something else, and then they wrote a book about it condemning their dads. I think that's where it came from. But
Yeah.
I think in a lot of cases, in more homogenous societies, a lot of men are often well off or good following their father's professions, and some aren't. It just
Yeah.
depends. I see this with the Amish a lot. Not even the Amish really push their children to directly follow their profession.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
So but I'm not opposed to it. It's just a case of where it works. It works. The Amish are very permissive, actually, in a lot of ways.
Oh, really?
In my opinion, yeah, from the dynamics is that because the Amish are all husbandmen in the sense that they all work with livestock and they understand the difference in personality and how to suit everybody for their unique
Yeah.
best task. So some people are not cut out to do certain things in their way of thinking. So we're not going to make them do that. They have to work. That's part of the Amish creed, but they can do different things,
Yeah. Yeah.
That's,
For sure.
Or they might have talents that they have to work at specifically. You notice they have a special talent for this or that, so direct them that way. But that's been the Amish are actually, in my mind, extremely flexible people. A lot
Yeah.
of people don't share that view. A lot of people act. It's like a lot of people act like the Amish are a mystery, like women. And to me, both women and the Amish are very simple.
They're simple to understand.
Simple
Yeah.
to understand, not simple-minded.
Yeah. Yeah. Understood. I haven't interacted with them too terribly much. Mennonites I've crossed paths with. I've got some stories of Mennonites.
Mennonites are the left wing of the Amish. So Mennonites and Amish are the right wing. Mennonites are the left wing.
They're different. They're very different. Yeah, they're different people, and don't make the mistake of asking if of Mennonites and Amish or vice versa. They're pretty cool about it, but I'm sure it's very cringe for them, to borrow from my kids' vernacular. Very cringe. um,
There's a folk musician who is ex Mennonite, and he is actually a special ed teacher when he's not being a folk musician, but he's famous. His band is called Possessed by Paul James, and he's always advocating for liberal causes in the most naive kind of way because that's the Mennonite mentality. Mennonites even adopt black children.
wow. So yeah, so I didn't know that about them. That they're actually more left wing. Wow.
But anyway, I would like to. I was
Well,
periodically. Go
they're
ahead.
probably different wherever they're at too, because there's the Belizean Mennonites, which I experienced, which are pretty different than the ones here in Missouri, and
They're more hardcore.
Yeah.
I understand.
Say again?
Did you find them more hardcore?
I thought they were pretty. Yeah. There's a massive amount of respect for them in Belize. Everyone knows. Don't mess with them. They keep our infrastructure in place. There's no question about it. Like, how here in America, like in the US, like the producers of society are like scorned. That's not the case in Belize. Everyone knows you take care of the Mennonites. They supply the country, essentially. And of course, there's the Asian supermarkets, which are so, yeah. I mean, it's like, there were no supermarkets prior to the Chinese coming over and setting up. So there's the Chinese, and then it's a very curious nation, really. It's a very diverse and strange one, but everyone there are Belizeans, it's strange, it's like, despite being just so heterogeneous in so many ways. But I thought the Belizean, they were charming, the Belizean Mennonites, and in some ways they're definitely their own. They're like some of the Filipinos I've known, which that's their gang, that's their group. They're quite insular. They know what they're all about, and and they stick to their guns. Now, maybe doctrinally we would have some differences, but I still kind of admire that folks walk the walk.
I admire them all. Just a funny aside. A lot of them in Missouri will adopt Black and Hispanic children because they're available for adoption. It's hard to get white children, and there's a.
Amish wouldn't do that, though, right?
I'm sorry.
Amish would not do that, right?
Amish are fairly racist.
Yeah, yeah.
They don't like black people.
Xenophobic. Yeah, they're kind of like the Japanese, maybe. Like they want to stay Japanese. They want to stay Amish. Is that right? Yeah.
They have a more unique devotion to their people. And the Mennonites, I don't know what their protocol is, but I don't know that they let the blacks mix with, but I just don't know.
You know what? So it's funny. I got to add this. So the Belizean Mennonites, and I can't speak for the others, they actually intermarry with Hispanics, and there's a lot of the intermingling, but they still are distinctly Mennonite.
Yeah.
So I've seen, anyways. That's kind of what I gathered. So you'd see like the very clearly German Mennonites, gentlemen and the ladies, but then you'd see, the Hispanics, and they're all sort of, they're going about their way. And what is the place called? It's called, oh goodness. Oh, there's an area of Belize where that's their turf, right? and so you're thinking, well, man, there's a lot of Hispanics here, and then the Belizean who's kind of like, or who is with us, she's like, oh no, they're Mennonites as well. They're the Belizeans are able to see that. They're able to see it by the walk or whatever, or they can just kind of tell if you're Mennonite.
Don't they dress accordingly with suspenders or whatever?
Yeah, they do. They do. But, for someone with an untrained eye like me, it's kind of hard, given you'll see a lot of traditional garments and that kind of thing. And then from a distance, of course. But I thought that was really interesting because you won't see that elsewhere with the Mennonites. But I'm sure there's been schisms as well, haven't there? Certainly, yeah.
Constant schisms, and that's why they really reject doctrinal study in churches, because they know
technology use, right? Some of them are very staunch, like others have cell phones and so on and so forth.
Well, it's just a matter of like the more doctrine they put, they try to avoid doctrine, because the more doctrine you study, the more disagreements you're going to have. So they try to have a very generic religious experience that avoids any kind of confrontation or argumentation amongst that will lead to schism.
Interesting.
Because the schisms are going to happen over technology or for something, but they try to minimize the risk of schism.
Yeah. I guess that makes sense. There's a pragmatic rationale for it. They've been around for as long as they have. So, hey, that's their thing. I wanted to also ask, I wanted to see what you thought of this. So I know you're sort of more in the entrepreneurial world. And then, Leanna, I believe you were in, correct me if I'm wrong, you were in sort of the administrative element of higher ed. Is that correct?
Yeah, she stepped away, but that's correct.
Yeah, and for a time, my experience has been, career wise, is I've jumped to different career paths. Like I've done different things, and so I've maintained resumes over the years, and one thing I've found is that when you're looking for work, for employment, some employers don't seem to take kindly to you having worn many hats and done many things. And so maybe that perhaps the specialization piece, perhaps there's there's a pragmatic reason for staying within a certain line of work, for the sake of maintaining, employment on a long-term basis and not rocking the boat. I've had to be creative at times, because I am one of those guys. I'll come in, I'll be at a startup or what have you. I'll do my thing, and then 4 years passes and I'm gone, and then I do the next thing, and I might do a different line of work. Do you think that it seems like this is just yet another mechanism to that sort of forces folks on that one track mindset, that idea of staying the course with their major or their, like, this is what I am. I've always been a proponent of just like jettison out of you start over. Starting over is an exciting thing for me anyways. Just starting over, taking the skills you've gathered from other roles and from other roles, and almost always been to the benefit of the company who hires me. I'm bringing all this experience from different sort of industries, and there's some things that are the same, right? Every system is relatively the same. This databases are basically the same. So there's that undercurrent of sameness, but then you're also bringing in all these other things. Going back to Heinlein's script here, his quote, you're supposed to do all these different things. That makes for a stronger candidate, I would think.
Well,
I had trouble hearing you. I'm sorry.
uh, she's going to reply in a minute, and
Oh,
I'll reply in the meantime with my reply, and that is, I think recruiters look at it from a glass half empty perspective, in the sense that, if you were not at any particular place long, you present a liability to the corporation or company based on your short-term employment, that you may also be short-term with them, and not
yeah.
basically pay your way as an employee, or pay your put in enough labor to justify the money they're investing in you as a employee. And obviously, even if you bring a lot of stuff to the table, that's their glass half empty perspective on it. In my opinion, that's how it comes across.
Yeah.
So that's as far as I've never worked in the corporate world, or so I couldn't venture any other thoughts, but that comes to mind right
Yeah.
off.
Yeah, and it's more par for the course these days that you'd stay 3 years, 3 to 5 years. That's kosher. That works out. It's not as looked. It's not so much the tenure or the length of time in which you're employed, although it is problematic if you're talking like every position. It's like a year or 2 years, and you're just doing this ad nausea. But you could switch it up a few times, and it's fine. But I think the issue is when you're kind of all over the place. You're showing that you do this and you do that, and you know, and so it's like there's this sense of being unfocused. And is this person just going to lose interest in this line of work? And that kind of plays into what you're saying.
Yeah.
You can see that, yeah, where it's like, is this person really committed to uh this sort of role when they've you know done 5 6 other things in the past or what have you.
Yeah, I try to think of it from the perspective of the company because the company would be my client. Obviously, I'm an independent contractor, but I always put out there that I've got mailbox money in the sense that I've got other clients, and I don't mind dropping them at a moment's notice.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, but that attitude is not conducive to a good rapport with a company necessarily. And so I appreciate that they have a sense of I don't know about this, this
Yeah.
situation, that
So
independence.
it can prove risky on both ends, both for
Exactly.
the.
Leanna's back, so I'll let her go ahead.
I can say in all the years of me hiring for my team, I always looked at a resume for do they job hop or do they stick? But I always wanted someone that had never done the kind of work we were doing so that we could start at step one.
Oh, cool. So you want to give someone a chance that's proven themselves elsewhere.
Someone to come in with preconceived notion of how things should be done. I wanted someone to come in fresh slate so that we could work together to find ways to do the job that worked for them.
Yeah. It's almost, it's almost, I'd almost rather have, yeah, exactly. Like somebody who's fresh to this.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Somebody who's done it perhaps would try to contort or conform or like they might want to see that they might want to bring that other place into it, like this is the way we did it there, and that can cause problems. It could be beneficial, the cross pollination of ideas, but to have somebody, again, going back to the blue collar worker or the blue collar business owner who has a kid who is eager to learn, I think that's greater stock than the college graduate who thinks they know everything, or the person who's coming in thinking they know it all. I almost would, and it's funny because I would be eliminating myself from the job pool with that mentality, and I'd be hiring in somebody else. But nevertheless, I think that philosophy is sound. Actually, you bring someone in who's new, that give them a chance and have them grow there and homegrown, and also, yeah, it's a great thing.
And in my opinion, fresh eyes are always good eyes.
Yes.
My addendum to that is, as somebody who has never done this, a person who tries hard is better than a person with intelligence.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, that's why this is. I was gonna say this is why I like Marines, but it would imply that they're not smart. No, I love Marines. I've always worked with them. I was a corpsman myself. Maybe I'm identifying myself too hard, but oh well, who cares, But I've always liked working with Marines, and I always have, because what I've found is they really will find the solution. I don't know what it is about a Marine. They'll find the solution. They might not know the answer, but they're going to get it. They're going to, yeah. I've just always really worked well with them in that respect. And I guess that's sort of what you've illustrated, the try hard. And not saying they're not intelligent, but they might not have the answers is what I'm saying,
My perspective as a non-Marine is that Marine training selects for heart.
Yeah.
And
you got to have heart to do that, right? I mean,
heart comes with the desire to try really hard to figure stuff out. And like you were saying, the training specifically selects for that kind of person.
Yeah. And they're just a different breed of people. They've very colorful people. That's for sure.
I always thought one of my best assets was I didn't know many of the answers I was being asked, but I knew who to go to get them.
What was that last bit?
I said, one of my best professional assets is if you ask me a question, 80% of the time I didn't know the answer, but I knew who to go to get it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's perfectly fine to not know the answer at that time, but you're going to do your darndest to either A, find that answer, or you're going to get that person connected with someone who has it. I mean, that's very valid, you know.
Well, you don't have to have all the answers. You have to know where to get.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's valid as of a skill set.
Well, and that just also in seeking out those answers, you just become a more, I guess, you have a broadened skill set as a result. That's why too, when I get things, I've also kind of never been the person to say it's not in my job description, even though I could very well have pulled that card many times throughout my career. And I'll tell you why, because I'm getting training out of this. I'm being exposed to a new thing. I'm learning something that if I say no to all that stuff, well, then I just become that person that just kind of stagnates.
Yeah.
So that kind of goes back to specialization is for insects. If you're not if you're not constantly learning, that's I don't know that can have its own set of challenges down the road.
Well, I think it's been a great broadcast. I want to add a little closing piece, and that is for people pursuing hobbies and so forth and so on. What I have noticed in the last few years is a lot of people who would be great teachers in a variety of fields have withdrawn from teaching and become jaded because of the lack of curiosity or interest in just whatever their particular area of specialty is related to hobbies or whatever. Or they might have multiple specialties or multiple skills, but nobody wants to learn from them, and they've withdrawn from being willing to teach. So you have to go the extra mile, and this is a rite of passage for the student to convince the master that you are worth teaching. So what I'm trying to do is encourage people, if you are indeed rebuffed in these circumstances, to continue to pursue if you believe if you believe in what you're wanting to learn and have that interest, to continue to pursue the people with knowledge who you want to learn from. So that's a very important deal in any case, in my opinion. That's my experience.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. I think that's a fine way to end it. Yeah, it's been a delight.
It's been awesome. So hopefully we're going to do another broadcast before the end of the week, and that'll be announced here before long. So without further ado, good night, all.
Bye bye.